live broadcast where we're going to talk about how do we continue to grow as artists. Today I have with me a bunch of my friends, so we're going to go around the room to introduce ourselves. Let's start with Russ. So Russ, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
My name's Russ Leach. You can find me on Comic Book Black Belt on YouTube and a bunch of other places. On to Scott.
Okay.
Okay.
How fast?
I'm Scott Circlin. You can find me at Circworks. It's SERKWORKS. Pretty much, I'm on YouTube. I'm on a little bit on Facebook, a little bit on Instagram, mostly YouTube, and then I've got my website at circworks.com.
Cool. Mike.
Hey, I'm Mike, and you can find me at the little thing that I put down there. There you go.
Nice. And Marsh?
Hey, Marshall Lee, and you can find me at donkeyjawprojects.com. Marsh makes comics on YouTube, and Marsh Comics most other places.
Okay, cool. So now that we all know each other, let's get started with the topic. So the topic was suggested by a person that hasn't actually made it yet. We're hoping that he'll make it in the end. And he said that he wanted to talk about how to continue to grow as artists. And we were just talking about it a little bit on the Discord, on the 100s, and how you can approach this question from different angles. So we're going to approach it from 3 angles. Okay, so the first angle is improving your skills, which is the most basic way of becoming a better artist. The second one is improving your creativity, your ideas, the generation of your ideas, and the authenticity of your ideas. And the third is improving your mindset, like your consistency, your resilience, and how frustrated you get with stuff and other, stuff that has to do with mindset. Okay, so let's start with the first one, which is improving your skill set. Let's go a little bit around the room. When you think about improving your skill set at this point in time, is it something that you're worried about, that you think about a lot, or is it something that you've left behind a little bit?
Are we going in the order?
Yeah, let's go in the order, and then we'll improvise.
Right. Okay. yeah, this is like being in the Brady Bunch.
Even more.
Yeah, I'm the old woman. Right. Yeah, okay, improvement. It's a constant thing, isn't it? They talk about it being a 10,000 hour thing where you get to a point where you've really grasped the basics. I'd like to think that I've grasped the basics by now, although you're always learning. Obviously, that's an obvious caveat. It's really just being at the coalface every day. I think you can't underplay habit forming, as in going and drawing every day, being creative every day, even if it's only in such a small way, why I think that whole 100 days of making comics is such a great thing. Never done it myself, but I'm really impressed by other people that do it. That said, I probably have done 100 days of making comics. I would imagine it's been a little bit more than that in succession. Yeah, it's about repetition, I think. In a good way, sort of training yourself to make sure and take notice of those little things around you, improving your skill sets, and always taking note of other people, taking note of other creators around you. It's important to be focused on your own style, though, I think, because you can go off in lots of different directions, but trying to make the way you do things as good as it can be is probably my focus. So I've realized over a period of time that over a long period of time, actually, that I was immature as far as my approach to other artists and my own work for a long period of time. And then I came to appreciate other artists, and that actually made my improvement much more solid and much quicker, because instead of trying to copy other people, instead of trying to think that one artist was better than another, I was soaking it all up and then trying to be confident with my own particular way of doing things. So kind of winding off the path there a little bit, but yeah, it's just like doing it every day. That's how to improve, and being aware of what's around you.
Okay, Yeah, you've mixed a little bit of three things
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
which is the way it works, really. But yeah, it's a little bit of mindset and a little bit of working on it every
Yeah.
day, and a little bit of actual improving your skill.
Mm.
And in terms of studying and doing specific things to improve your art, is there anything you do in particular these days?
I go and look. I don't necessarily use it directly, but I look at a lot of photographic reference, especially for human faces. It's just going and seeing real faces and lots of different ones. So pretty much like I was saying before, it's a variety. So taking in as much as you can in order to output as much as you can, because it's always going to be a subset. You're never going to be able to output everything that's in your head or everything that you've seen. You can't possibly do that. Well, unless you're a savant, of course. But I can't do that. So by taking in as much as possible, I try to have like a library of stuff in my head, but also reference is really good. So looking at people's faces, photographs of people's faces. If I can ever do any anatomy or still life, but that gets harder and harder to do just because you're up against deadlines all the time, finding that time. So Google is great for that. It's your friend. There's just like this library all the time. There's a library of you to go and look at things and try and soak them in. I often get accused by my wife of like, what are you looking at? And I'll be looking at the way I'll be literally just be examining the way that her face is, the way that her mouth moves when she talks. I'll look at people on the TV. I'll look at my kids. I'll look at my cat. I find myself being lost in the detail of how things work. So I'll get lost in a film and not really realize what the story is because I'm too busy looking at the people and what they're doing. So yeah, those are my tools. Really, observation I think is the tool that's most for me. I try and observe as much as possible, and then filter that back into my work.
Okay, cool. What about you, Scott? Is there anything you do in particular to improve or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the act of creating, and when you're creating, you're constantly learning new things. But the thing sometimes I worry about is that I'm not as far as just the base, like Russ says, I would hope I know, for some of the, the majority of the basics and things like that, but there's always things that I can improve on as far as the drawing. Like, I've been drawing forever, but I still, you still have trouble with hands and certain poses and things like that. And that's all stuff that sometimes I feel I should be working on more. Like I haven't really gone into like any kind of continuing education in a long time, like going back to like take life drawing lessons and things like that, which I probably should. And sometimes I feel like, I hear about these people that are super accomplished artists and they're still going to like these atelier centers and just really even, I mean, you would look at their work and you think, wow, they're just perfect, but they're still continuing their education. And sometimes I feel kind of guilty that I'm not doing as much of that. But on the, on the other side, I am learning new things. Like I'm, and some of it's some of it I worry that it's kind of getting away from the drawing and more into either like the business of art, or like I've been designing these digital products, tools for making comics and things. And a year ago I didn't really know how to make like a Photoshop brush or put together a font or things like that. So I'm learning new things, and it's creative, but it's not like drawing and I would consider probably my first love and my favorite thing to do comics. And sometimes I'm building things, it's all comic centric, but it's not necessarily, comics. I really haven't, I mean, I'm always drawing, doing Inktober and stuff like that, but I haven't really worked on a comic since, since the 100s anthology. And, and with comics, I mean, you do, I mean, there's so much, actually drawing and, perspective and figure drawing and all that kind of stuff that you really need to do and practice and improve. And sometimes I feel like I'm getting away from that. But it's moving into other areas. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know if that actually answers the question, but But that's
Yeah, it does.
that's what goes up in my head when I think of improving on my art and stuff like that. That I definitely could be doing more, but it's like it seems like if I was to actually go to take a class, it would take away from other things that I'm doing that are creative, but they're not moving the needle as far as improving my drawing skills.
Right, right. Yeah, it's like you can think about it in a very narrow way, like drawing skills,
Right.
or you can think it in a more open way, and it depends on really what your objective is, I guess. Uh, but I would count that. I don't know about you guys, but I count it as improving. Okay, so what about you, Mike? What are you doing something in particular, or is it more like circa Scott and Russ?
It's a big question. I think for me, the whole idea of studying and improving and developing is just kind of part of what it's all about. I love academic settings for art. I really wish that I could just continue going to school forever, but it's one of the most expensive kind of schools you could go to, because they're usually private. You can't get much government funding, or you have to pay for it yourself. But anyways, aside from that, I enjoy learning about art. I enjoy that setting of trying to push the limits of what this blank 2D surface can capture. It's always that's kind of what got me into all this in the first place. I love the storytelling aspect. I love comics. I love cartoons. But when I think about like what really drives me, it's that idea of pushing what your skills are capable of capturing out of that world. Kind of like what Russ is saying. I do that too. I bring a little sketchbook with me everywhere. Even if I don't have like a big one, I make these tiny little ones. They're just like little pieces of scrap paper that I tape together or staple together. And it's small enough to like fit in my pocket. Because sometimes, just the other week, actually, we were walking around with some family and we were at a train station. And it was just a nice fall day. It was like the golden hour in the evening where the sun is just kind of, it's coming down in a certain way that it hits everything in a way that it just doesn't throughout the rest of the day. And I was, similar to what Russ was saying, I was standing there staring at the sidewalk, and my sister-in-law was like, "What are you doing? Does he always do this?" Because it was just hitting that stone and the concrete in such a way that it was like sparkles, and like my mind was going crazy. Like, oh, I could create a brush like it's like a dust or something to like get that kind of effect, and that would be really cool. And it's like weird little things like that like get me excited about everything. And somehow, some way, that connects to making comics. That connects to writing, even. Like it's those little things that, like, I don't know, create the spark for me. And so for me, like, the only logical way to capture those things that I'm, in awe of is study. It's to then take that and then make some time in my day at some point, whether that's now or whether that's a year from now, to remember that and then, try and discover how I can replicate that, So I guess in general, the overarching kind of answer to the question about how it fits in is it has to be habit. It has to be something that's kind of like a daily or weekly or occasional habit for me, something that I have to make time for. I feel like I could get better just making the stuff, like just making my comics or just making art pieces. But I feel like without those little moments and that little bit of curiosity, maybe I haven't had enough coffee. Hang on a second. Without that, I don't think I could actually like fully realize any of my ideas in a way that I'd feel satisfied and like I'm participating in what it is that I'm trying to do. It's such a big field, though, and so many people have so many different goals with it. So it's tough to say like what's right for everybody. But for me, I think I really am just in love with the idea of learning more than anything else.
Right. Cool. Yeah. No, I definitely like see what Russ and you, Mike, are talking about observing things and thinking, wouldn't that be cool in a drawing or a painting? The other day it happened to me in the metro. I was in the metro and there was this huge guy, like he was so big. And his face was so amazing, and I was just staring at him thinking, I need to remember this person to and I was like, I should probably stop, because we're in the middle of the subway and I'm staring at this really huge guy. And like I sometimes get enough, like the diversity, like I'm especially when it comes to people, when I see people that are very different,
Mhm.
it really grabs my attention. And the way people talk also, like I'm always eavesdropping and stuff, because I love how people talk to each other. So yeah, it can get into the dangerous area of you're staring at people in public spaces. But yeah, I definitely am with you too on that one. And what about you, Marsh?
Yeah, let's see. I wrote some notes here because I was thinking about what you guys were saying and some other things. But I really like what Mike was saying. Kind of falling in love with learning. And I feel like that's how I feel. I feel like I want to learn and like never stop learning. Like I'm always wanting to learn more, even if it isn't like for a specific purpose or something like that. Unfortunately, time kind of kind of screws me up a little bit with some of that. But my eyes are always open, like Russ was saying. My ears are always open, and I'm always paying attention to these little things. And I think it's kind of interesting too. Like you can learn a lot without actually practicing, and I'm not saying you shouldn't practice, but I think it's really important to sometimes. Like I want to bring up Brooks Eggleston. I was watching one of his videos today, and I remember in an older video, he was talking about sometimes the difference between like um, what where you're trying to get to and like struggling when you can't get to the place you want to get to. Sometimes it's not about like doing more practice as much as there's something you don't know that you haven't learned yet, and once you learn it, you'll be like, oh, you do it this way, and then you'll have to practice it, but you'll automatically get a little bit better. So I think learning is just it's just huge. And then another thing that he said today that I noticed is like obviously keeping a sketchbook. We should all probably be keeping a sketchbook on a daily basis. I like what Mike was saying about habit. And that being said, I go in and out of phases of keeping a sketchbook, and a lot of times I'm not.
Mhm.
But that being said, I like the idea of drawing kind of with. I think you should draw to practice with a purpose, but also drawing without the like this whole thing of like social media. We're all kind of caught in this loop of trying to, build a fan base and stuff like that, or maybe we're not so much caught. Some people are more or less. I'm definitely more into it. But there's a lot of stuff in the sketchbook that we'll never see social media necessarily, unless you do like a sketchbook tour or something like that. But um, you know, he brought this thing. He was talking about, the fact that like if you're drawing for the purpose of I got to put something on Instagram today, you actually lose something in your learning. You're not really kind of giving yourself fully over to the process of learning, I feel like. And that is something that I don't know. I just think it's an important point that caught my interest today when I was watching that. Then again, another thing that was brought up is kind of the project is a big part of kind of leveling up. I really think that like there's a lot to be said for on the job training. And just making something. And not only a big part of why making something helps you to learn is because you bring something from an idea to a finished place. And if you can do that I think you learn more from that than just random sketches sometimes. I mean, random sketches are good too, but like there's definitely something to be said for finishing a whole project, even if it's just an illustration. And yeah, I don't know. That's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like when you're doing things, especially if it's the first time, I think there's a lot of learning that comes from that cannot happen if you're just training. If you get what I mean, especially with things such as skills. Like, for example, this stream, right? This is the first time that I stream on StreamYard, and I forgot to change the thing to public, so the thing wasn't public for the first like 20 minutes or something. But but like, it's the first time I do it, so even if I studied it and I watched it online, I was like, and then perfect, I know everything. And then when I did it, I didn't think about it because I've never done it before. So I agree with Marsh. With like, there is an element of practicing the different parts, but you never know what it's like until you actually put everything together. So
Totally.
there has to be that balance. Yeah.
Can I add something onto that too? Because I got a good friend that I've been trying to kind of get this concept across to for a while. Because we can get into this habit of like learning. Like, we just acquire all these new proficiencies. But until we actually like try to put it to use in something that we actually care about in some way, I feel like those connections just don't get solidified in the same way that they do when you use them for something that means something to you, But it doesn't have to be crazy and big. Like, one of my friend's arguments was like, yeah, but I don't want to commit to like a big thing like comics or like a film or something like that. And I was like, it doesn't even have to be like that. Commit to doing, I don't know, 3 studies that relate to each other, make that your project. And sometimes just having a focus, whether it's big or whether it's little, and producing something that you intend to like put your heart and soul into and make finished, that'll be the thing that like actually makes all that learning stick. Otherwise, you're just learning. It doesn't mean anything. It's going to go away. Your brain's going to recycle that because you're not using it, So yeah, I just wanted to add that, especially if he's listening. Make a thing, man. Make a thing.
No, absolutely. And in relation to that, just one little point more on that end is like, my experience mostly is with teaching languages, and I find that there's a big difference between learners in Japan. Like, I had some Japanese learners and learners in other parts, especially in Europe. I feel like in Holland and the Central European areas, there is in Japan, they're very technical people, so they train a lot the grammar and they do drills and they repeat and then they get it perfect. So if you give them grammar drills and you give them stuff like that, they're really good at it. But you ask them a question and they have to express their ideas in English, and they're like, they're completely and I talked to them and said, so guys, like, you're really good at English, what's your problem? And they were like quiet, and they were like, we've never practiced actually expressing ourselves in English, so we don't know how to do that. And it's like, well, then that's what we need to work on. So training specific technical skills doesn't necessarily translate to expressing yourself using those skills. Those are 2 different things. And having said that, anyone else, any thoughts on this little point?
I mean, I think that's definitely interesting. That I'm kind of curious. It's definitely interesting, kind of observing ourselves, learning how we all as individuals learn. But I'm curious, you being a teacher, it's kind of it's interesting that you bring that up. Is there anything else that you observe from other people learning that maybe we could learn from to learn better?
I don't think so. But, well, I've made a general observation that there are like 2 kinds of people, generally speaking. Like, the expressive people are the technical people, and the expressive people take 2 things or 3 things and they run with it and they can express themselves really well. But they make mistakes. They stammer or whatever. But in the end, they put across their point. Whereas the technical people, in theory, they have more skill to communicate, but they don't. Because it's not the same thing. Like, naturally, people that are expressive are used to getting round, not having the correct word or the correct way of saying things, and so they become very expressive and really flexible in their thinking. Whereas technical people, if they don't have the exact word they're looking for, or if they don't have the exact thing they need, they get stuck. And they get really frustrated. And so you have to train technical people to be more expressive and expressive people to be more technical. So it's like you have to fight against your nature in order to become better at communicating, basically. That's my observation in general.
Yeah, that is something I've talked to other teachers before, and They do make, at least in the States, I know they make it a point now to try to cater to different kind of learning styles and stuff like that. And I think that's really important, because that I could definitely see how some people kind of lost opportunities in school, like thinking back growing up in school and stuff, because, you know, their specific way of learning just wasn't, I mean, even myself, like, I know I could have learned math a lot better if they approached it differently. Now, back then I thought it was boring. Now I think math is exciting, but I'm not in a, you know, a class anymore and stuff. I mean, I can learn it myself for sure. It's one of the many things I'd love to learn, you know, but it's just interesting that everybody has different learning styles and stuff.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. No, I mean, to me, I kind of feel like for the most part, the school system sort of failed me to the point where, because I was always in remedial classes and, you know, and just like, you know, they would just put me in the bag. Like, you know, they just didn't know how to teach me. And I guess the learning style wasn't designed for someone like me. So it took, you know, I got, you know, to the point where, you know, I was probably one of those kids like where most adults might think, oh, this kid, you know, because I was like just drawing on the back of my papers and all that kind of stuff. Well, this kid, you know, he's probably not going to make anything of himself or whatever. But you know, you get in the real world and you kind of figure, when you're on your own, you kind of figure out other ways to learn and learn at your own pace or learn your own way. And then I'm like, you know, and then you come to this realization, well, I'm not stupid. I just, you know, I learn differently. And when you find a way to teach yourself the correct way, then, you know, I've been fortunate enough that I can actually do what I love for a living. And I couldn't, you know, for the most part, really couldn't be happier. So, you know, it's kind of a weird thing, but it's good. And I don't, you know, my kids, watching my kids in school, they're completely different than me. I mean, they're all straight A's, like gifted, all that kind of stuff. They probably get that from their mom or whatever. But so I don't really know how they're like teaching in school, you know, now. But it's nice to hear that they are, you know, trying to do different things rather than just that one certain way that only works for certain kinds of people.
Absolutely. So like one size doesn't fit all. So yeah, if you're we can leave it as that in this area. So we've talked about growing as an artist in terms of learning and improving your skills, and it can be skills like Scott was saying, like improving your business skills or improving you know, other areas that are also really important for your art. And now we're going to talk about improving your creativity. Okay, so I think these are two completely different things. Your ability as an artist or as a writer is completely different to like your ability to be creative, generate ideas that have value, and avoid being a copycat. Because like someone could be out there, and this is what I'm thinking about in particular, someone could be out there trying to be an absolute copy of the best artist, like I don't know, Moebius. I don't know how to say it. Moebius or all these people that people admire, and they cannot do anything more than that. They take those skills, they acquire them, and all they can do is copy them. And they don't have anything new to add because they haven't nurtured their creativity, in my opinion. So what do you think about nurturing your creativity and becoming more creative and generating ideas with value? Russ, you go first.
Okay, yeah. It's the clockwise. Here I am. Who was? Sorry, I'm really rubbish at notes. Somebody was saying about there being two types of people: technical and.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, it was you. Yeah,
and expressive.
Yeah, I think I kind of unusually for an artist. I think I lean towards the technical. I'm quite sort of mechanical in the way that I approach things. I think some of that has been beaten into me because I've had a career in production for retail and for advertising for different companies. It's hard to explain, but because of the environments that I've been involved in for the vast majority of my career, been very much pressure environments, and the creativity from those environments has been what works at the time. So you have to, it's almost like solving problems. And I think I bring some of that to my storytelling and to my art and certainly my business process, because it's just me and I have to make sure that everything gets done. So I think I'm kind of more technical than creative, and I would say I've always had that problem of wanting to be the penciler. I've always wanted, in the past, I've always just wanted to be a penciler. Somebody else does the inking, somebody else gives me a story, and I just make it happen on the page. But I've found more recently that I'm far more interested in telling a whole story, and to get to that point, to be more creative, it's pretty much very similar to what I was talking about with the art, is just taking more things in. So the more the more references you go and look at, and the more inspiration you find, I think the more it literally inspires you to come up with more ideas and be more creative. What you were saying about copying other artists, for instance, I think as a younger artist, and certainly myself as a more naive creative, that was what I wanted to do. I kind of saw the flashy thing and ran after it. It's like, oh, squirrel. I couldn't focus on myself, and I was constantly trying to copy other people's styles. And it took me a long time to be comfortable with the way that I drew. And I think that's a big part of being creative, as well as being comfortable with what you are and being confident with what you're going to bring to the world. So you're not constantly under the pressure of trying to hit a benchmark that one of your favorite artists or creators that you're kind of chasing. So, for instance, my favorite artist is John Buscema. There's no secret. But there are many other artists of the time period, and there are far more recent artists that I do think a lot of, and it's very difficult to kind of look at them and go, oh, I really like that. I want to incorporate that. I want to draw like that. And you've got to wind yourself back and go, no, I'm inspired by it. What can I do that will make me unique? What can I do that will make me stand out from the crowd? And be confident with your own style. And I think that in itself, being confident with your own work and pushing hard to make your own uniqueness out of the inspirations that you've used throughout your creative process will eventually lead to you being more creative. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I think that's the way it works for me.
No, I get it. Like it's a mix between taking influence from other people, learning from them, and then finding what's unique about you and putting that in the work as well.
Yeah, what works for them, and how does that work for me? But not just copying them, but saying, why is their work? Analyzing other people's work, other people's creations, and going, why does that work? And I suppose that's the technical aspect for myself of finding the problem solving aspect. Why does that work? Where is the equation? What is it about that work that makes it work? Not that I want to copy it, but it strongly influences because it fits with the way that I want to create. So
yeah, taking it back to education, not to be horribly repetitive, I think that happens a lot in history. When you go to study history, a lot of people just copy what the book says, and that's not history. That's copying what the book says. But if you understand what they're trying to say, and you understand the different data points, and then you can put them together in your own way, then you are studying history. You are, understanding history.
Understanding and analysis. Yeah.
Exactly. Good. I like that. I think I agree with that. What about you, Scott? How do you go about being more creative? Is it something that you try to do intentionally?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the one thing that I'm trying to do right now is like, first, I think kind of going off of what Russ was saying, I think when you first start off, there's whatever inspiration you have, whatever you tend to kind of want to ape kind of that particular artist and everything, and I don't think that's a bad thing in the beginning, but then you run a real danger though if you're so infatuated with that particular style or whatever you want to call it, and that's just kind of, and you just kind of keep going down that path. But I think once you start, I think the more, the more interest you have, and I think if you kind of seek out broader interests rather than just, even, where most of us here do comics. So beyond even comics, if you start pulling in other, like one of my biggest inspiration is Jim Henson. Not a really, I mean, I've seen him do little sketches in a sketchbook, but he's not like an artist in that sense. But he's a creative person, and I can still, there's still so much I gather from that. Whether it's kind of the way he designed worlds, or like, or just like the Muppet Show, the sets and things, and that kind of leads into, what, like, I don't know, even like Willy Wonka, or like if you've seen my videos, I've got kind of this, underground lair type thing, and some of that's from, fascination with like those kind of crazy Rube Goldberg inventions, or like 90s Nickelodeon, Mystery Science Theater, all these other things that aren't really art, that kind of, it finds its way into the kind of thing that I like. So I think you need to kind of look beyond, whatever your interests are, beyond just comics or whatever. And I think the broader those interests are, the more your work is going to feel different from everything else, because most of this is just subconscious. You don't even, I never really went out and said, oh, I'm kind of going for something that Jim Henson did, like say a Pigs in Space or something like that, when I'm designing these sets. But all these little influences, they're in there, and then they kind of, I guess, congeal, and then they become something altogether different in whatever, in whatever you're doing. But then you take all these interests, and now I think what I'm trying to do with those is I'm trying to kind of, I guess, find a niche for myself, niche or niche, however you want to pronounce it, where, I'm sort of kind of, people would probably know me as sort of the mad science art guy, so that right there, that I think that sets me apart from a lot of other people. So I think having a broad number of interests, and then kind of taking those and like, well, what does I like about each of these things, and what do they have in common? And then for me anyway, how can I design that to kind of fit my life and the things that I like to create, so it's sort of memorable. So it's not, part of it's marketing, but part of it is just I'm doing the stuff I love. I like to do robots, I like to do aliens, I like to do zombies, all that stuff, and I've kind of find a way to roll all that stuff into one thing that I can kind of use as a brand. And maybe that's kind of like sort of more of a crass kind of marketing thing, but I'm kind of a person that enjoys marketing almost as much as I enjoy the art. So
yeah, it's a creative field as well, so it's okay to enjoy it. We're not judging. Okay, what about you, Mike? What do you think about this whole creativity thing?
Oh boy, I should have been taking notes, because you guys all said a lot of things that I could relate to, or have something to comment on. I think the one thing that I can touch on, where I think I'm a little different than what Scott was describing, but again, that's maybe because I'm at a different point in my life too, or whatever the case is. But about influences. So I come from mostly a film background, though I studied a lot of animation and game design when I was in college. So a lot of that was like pre-production kind of stuff. And oftentimes it goes back to the client thing. It's not up to me what the thing is supposed to look like. It's usually the client or the producer, the director, or whatever has a vision. And often their way of communicating that vision is by showing me artwork from other people. That's 10 times out of 10, that's exactly how it goes. Say, I saw this thing, can you build that? Or, hey, I saw this thing and I like that, but we can't afford him. Can you do something similar? Something like that. So a lot of like my, I guess, training and development as an artist at that kind of critical age where I'm coming out of education and I'm trying to get work and I'm trying to develop and mature, was working in that way, was combining things kind of creatively, where it's like, okay, I get that idea. I like what, the things that you've given me to work with, but I'm an artist too. I don't want to just copy these people. I want to do my own thing. So what can I do with all of this and make it mine? And so a lot of my approach anytime I'm creating anything is really intentionally drawing in very specific influences that I can be inspired by. I'm not looking to copy them, just looking to learn something about why it is that I like what they're doing. Perfect example is with Sisyphine Complex right now. I have so many influences going into that I've gotten into a phase now where I'm trying to whittle it down and simplify it. Because again, it comes down to what Russ was saying about, do I really want to execute this the way that they execute it, or am I just inspired by it? Is it just something that's attractive to me because I like what they do, and it's kind of differentiating stuff like that. And sometimes in order to do that, I find myself doing a lot of studies of, these various influences. Sometimes it's of a period. I've been doing a lot of like fashion concept illustration of like, the futurist movement and stuff from like the 60s, like the go-go periods and stuff like that. But I've also been trying to mash that with things that are completely unrelated. And part of that, I think, is what I try to do to keep myself fresh, is I look into stuff that I have no interest in and kind of like force myself to find something about it. And sometimes that turns out cool. Sometimes it turns out really stupid. But either way, it gets my mind thinking in a different direction. Like with the Goblins comic that I did for the anthology, for the costume design, I found, and this kind of relates to something that Scott said too about, you get to a point where you do sort of leave your influences behind and you kind of do your own thing. For me, I felt like a lot of what I was doing over time was getting stale because I wasn't bringing in enough influences from the outside. Personally, I was getting, I think, cocky, and I felt very confident that, I don't need anything like that. I could just make stuff up and it's going to be awesome. But I started noticing that, especially with my medieval kind of stuff, it was all kind of getting pretty generic and repetitive and kind of, cliche. And so for the comic for the anthology, I decided to like just go nuts with it and really throw in some crazy influences. So I went with like your typical ancient armor kind of approach because that seems to be it works for goblins and that sort of setting. It kind of works to go something a little older, and but instead of doing your stereotypical kind of like standard fantasy garb or barbarian garb, I went and actually looked at history. So I looked at like samurais, I looked at different periods of different like great wars, and especially from different countries. So instead of doing just my typical idea of like, you look at like the Nazi generals and soldiers and stuff like that is kind of a common, place to get inspiration from for war kind of stuff. I looked at like the Polish armies, and I looked at the Czech armies, and the different armies, even the Italian armies. They have some very strange military garb compared to everybody else. I never would have known unless I was like, hey, check that out. And then on top of that, I put the punk rock element on it. So it's like, well, how can I make this punk? How can I turn this armor into something that would be, more punk? And then to just throw myself a curveball, that difficult thing, I have this book that's like just a bunch of really old-timey English house appliances and things like that, like tea kettles and decorations and whatever. And so I would look at that stuff and say, make armor out of that. Good luck, But it was like challenging myself in those weird ways that like, yeah, sometimes like using a lantern to try to like make a piece of armor didn't work. But the process of doing it gave me ideas about how I could use something from that to make something that does work and something that is cool. So I don't know. I think it's a balance. Like with anything, it's a balance. And I feel like if you feel stuck, then maybe one of the best ways is to draw in new influences. Maybe not the old ones because you've already tapped them out, but new and unexpected kind of places, just to keep it fresh and keep things interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I find like there's two common threads here. Like you guys are talking about having a variety of input, like experiencing a lot of influences, going out, looking at things, and getting all that information in your head. But then there's another interesting point, which is something that you said about introspection. Well, you didn't say exactly introspection, but like you said, like you have to look inside and see, am I copying this because I think it's cool, or is it because I think I can deliver this in a way that like I can use their techniques?
Mhm.
So like you also have to be a bit critical of why you're picking that up. Is it because it's the hot latest thing and you want to be part of that, or is it because it's actually going to serve your purpose? So yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. What about you, Marsh? How do you do the creativity stuff?
Yeah, I think it's interesting talking about like bringing in influences, and I really like the idea of being very deliberate and stuff, because it's kind of funny, like growing up when I was younger, I felt like I always wanted to be original when I was younger. That was like a big deal to me. I didn't want to be like everyone else. And then you get like kind of that typical thing. Well, this group, me and my friends, we're trying to strike out and do something different. We're not original, but you all dress the same, like that type of thing. And there's been times like when I've tried to create something quote unquote original, and when I go back and look at it, it's totally like it's almost the most derivative thing I could make. And it's like, okay, something's not right here. So, I think it can be difficult. It's like the idea of like looking at a blank page, like that problem of just like, oh no, like what do I do? It's kind of intimidating. And so I think it has to do with like limitations. And I think taking away all limitations is something that's really good. Like I like what Mike was saying about, bringing in influences that have nothing to do with like, armor and stuff, like let's see, how can I, make this swamp, like make armor out of like, swamp foliage or something like it's totally different. But like, so it's like going as far outside the box as you possibly can and taking away limitations, and then adding limit or like artificial limitations is important too. So I don't know, like saying, all right, I'm gonna make Lord of the Rings, but I'm gonna make Lord of the Rings with cats, like, and you can like kind of bring in certain things, and I don't know, there's and it's like now you only have like cats and like cat mythology to work with. So you're gonna bring in mice, you're gonna bring in like yarn balls, you're gonna bring in all kinds of silly stuff, and I mean, look at like mouse, like I mean, things like that, So I think it's important to play with limitations, whether you're taking them out or putting them in, and also challenging yourself, because I like what Russ was talking about. Creativity is like, it's like problem solving, and I see this. One thing is I like to encourage creativity in all aspects of life, not just in art. A lot of people think creativity and they think art, writing, music, things like that. But literally, I think it's almost like to be human is to be creative a lot of times. Sometimes, like we're not always as creative as we maybe could be. But like I like to encourage creativity in everything, because like even I see times at like different jobs I've had and stuff, and there's always like a problem that comes, and it's like, oh, we can't do this because this happened, and it's like, so you automatically just think we can't do this because of this, so you make like an excuse. But what if you see that problem and you're like, well, instead of making an excuse, like use your resourcefulness, like don't say because of this we can't do it. Be like, okay, this happened, how can we do something different that'll make this actually still work, that kind of thing. Like you can do that with creative art projects as well as just in regular life. And so in that aspect, a lot of times another little kind of piece of this puzzle sometimes is pressure. Like when the pressure's on, it'll breed creativity. Like, you can't help it. Like, when you're, when you've gone down the garbage chute and you're in Star Wars and, you're like, all right, what are we going to do? We're about to get crushed here. You're going to start to get a little creative. You might not successfully get out of the trap, but you're going to start to get creative. So, pressure can definitely breed creativity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you're saying as well, because recently I saw this interview with a lady that does experiments with monkeys, basically, and she's trying to figure out exactly how do we think different from other monkeys and apes and stuff like that, to see what makes us unique. And one of the things she discovered through her experiments is that, she did this experiment where she had a box, and an experimenter would come in and would perform this really weird ritual on how to open this strange box. And so the monkeys would copy that. I was like, okay, this box is probably open in the same way that this dude opened the box. And then they would bring in human infants and do the same thing. So the children would do exactly the same, like knocking it or doing whatever, and then opening the box. And what happened then is that they did the same thing, but with a transparent box, like completely transparent. So you could obviously see how to open the box without the knocking and the nonsense. And what happened was that the monkeys would look at the experimenter, look at the crazy things he was doing with the knocking and the shaking and everything. And they would look at them like, you're an idiot. Like, this is obviously how you open the box. But human infants would do exactly what the experimenter did without questioning at all whether that was the fastest way of doing it. So apparently we have ingrained in ourselves that we copy what experts do or what people we admire do. So as children, that would be adults. As artists, that would be the people we admire. And that's a way of thinking that apparently is ingrained in us. And maybe that's something we have to combat a little bit. But I don't know. That's like new stuff that I found out this week. So I haven't really thought about it. Okay. So any other comments about this creativity stuff? Because I have a note here from Gas that says that, sorry, I couldn't make it, baby. So I think it means like his baby, he had some problem with the baby, not that he's calling me baby, but okay. So let's move on to the last point I wanted to discuss in relation to growing as an artist, which is improving your mindset, consistency, resilience, motivation. And Russ was touching on this at the beginning when we were talking about improving your skill, and he was talking about mindset a little bit as well. So I don't know if you want to repeat what you said.
Yeah,
if you remember what you said.
Eating, paying the mortgage, that pretty much inspires me. I think because I do feel extremely fortunate to be able to do for a living something very creative. There's not many of us in the real world, and there's so many people doing proper jobs. I also feel a little bit intimidated being in a room full of artists. Because I don't consider myself in that vein, probably because of what I was saying earlier about having a career in production, and much like Mike was saying, you do things to a brief, so your creativity was limited. It was limited to sit within the boundaries of what you were asked to do, so that your company got paid. It's as simple as that, and so some of that has definitely come into me being on my own and drawing comics when I can get the comic work, because as we all know, it's very difficult to be drawing comics all the time. So I'll be on another client's work next week, which will be reasonably creative, but nothing's going to match drawing my own book. So being in, getting motivated to do these things, it's a different motivation. So doing my own book, there is a business aspect to it. I want to be in a situation where I've got a pipeline and hopefully a readership, and they feel like they're part of the story that I'm creating. They want to buy the book, and then I have a pipeline by which I then don't hopefully have to take client work ever again. That's the goal. That's the main aim, so that you have a series or you have a production process where you get an audience involved, and that becomes your inspiration to get on and do the job, because you're telling a story and also making money. As far as the other stuff, which obviously pays my bills at the moment, I have to be inspired. I have to push myself, and I believe that's the difference between. And I don't want to upset anybody here, but it is the difference between being professional, doing it for a living, and doing it as something that you like to do. You have no choice. Whether you're a full-time comic strip artist or just a full-time creative doing a job on any kind of creative project, you don't have the luxury of thinking, do you know what? I don't really feel inspired today. You kind of have to get up. You have to do it because otherwise you don't get paid. So there is that difference between doing it as something that you purely love to do and want to do, and something that actually makes you your money. And so the whole question of inspiration and the whole question of drive and motivation is mixed up between the things that you love and the things that you have to do. So sometimes it's literally it's as simple as, I really love this project and I don't need to be pushed to do it because I'm in love with it. And at other times it's, I have to, find the bills. I have to get paid. So I've got to get on and find something within me to make this work for the client. So it's kind of two ways. There's two ways of looking at the way that I drive myself to get motivated to do X project. Hope that helps.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting because you're making a difference there between, and I think this is a general misconception that being professional means that you're really good at it. No, being professional is about the attitude you have.
Yes.
About the work.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think about that, Scott?
So the question, the topic is motivation. Is that
mindset in general?
Mindset, okay. Well, I would kind of piggyback off a lot of stuff Russ said. Actually, I pulled this quote. I don't know if you can see that. It's Chuck Close. It says, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us show up and get to work." So, yeah, I mean, I pretty much wholeheartedly agree with Russ, and kind of like what you guys were saying. It's not being a professional or whatever isn't necessarily that you're the best at this but it is kind of sort of a mindset. I mean, it's much connections with people. It's as much actually delivering on what you say you're going to deliver on. It's all of these things that it's probably more of those things than it actually, in some cases, that actually is the art, because you could be just a brilliant artist, but if you're somebody that's difficult to work with, people aren't going to want to work with you. And you could be maybe not as great an artist, but if people love working with you, then you'll probably do a little bit better. And I just asked this question. We're talking motivation, or is that what that's
motivation is part of it? Like, it's mindset. Like, what are the ways of thinking that help you grow as an artist, basically?
So I guess in the broader sense of growing as an artist, not necessarily as a professional. I think that's where I kind of got stuck on. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of that does tie into what we were talking about before with just trying to improve your skills. And yeah, I mean, there's so many different factors and everything. I mean, I think it's kind of what that quote says, is showing up and get to work. I mean, the more work you do, the better you're going to get. The more I don't know.
No, yeah, I completely get what you're saying. Like, it's the mindset of showing up. Yeah.
Can I jump in there?
Yes, please. Yeah. I need help.
Exactly what Scott was saying about it being a state of mind, because like all of us in this room, I consider extremely professional. And I know that Marshall Lee has a side gig. Like, he has to go and do a proper person's job during the day. And he's one of the most professional people I've ever come across. And I've met lots of people in production and a fair few now in comic book work as well. And he's way up there. And he's not getting paid to draw comic books every day of the week. He's got a proper job, and he does this because I know that he'd like to do this. I think I'm right in saying that, but also that he does it as a passion. And I've met very few people as professional and as committed and as just so competent at communication and getting their point across as Marshall. So I'm exactly with Scott there. It's the way that you approach everything, and it builds in that state of mind. It's how you approach your work, how you approach your creativity, how you approach your projects. It's all in there within you, and you're the only person, exactly as that thing, that little thing that you held up there, Scott. You got to pull your own finger out and you got to get on with it. And it's that mindset of, I got to do this, whether it's for a personal project or whether it's because you're getting paid to do it. So just bigging you up there, Marshall, but you deserve it. So.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. The Russ's point is be Marsh.
He asked the same thing about all you guys, though. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I want to veer off a little bit from what you're saying, because I think we all agree with that. Maybe Mike doesn't. I don't know, but I think he does. Do you? Swallow your coffee and tell me.
Now, Mike.
About the mindset and
about showing up and being professional.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean,
okay, no, sorry. So because I think we all agree on this, and I'm pretty sure we all agree on this, I wanted to veer off a little bit because I think this question was a little bit, lacking in concretion. But anyway, that I wanted to say that what happens if we're talking about things such as art envy, or feeling like you're not good enough, or imposter syndrome, which is something that you've mentioned, Russ, like feeling like you don't belong in a room with other artists. What about that sort of stuff? That's also what I'm talking about with mindset.
That's where the little creative in me comes out on my shoulder and starts making me cry. When I look through,
you show up.
I look through a book like this, and it makes me cry. It's just drive, isn't it? I think we've all got that drive to be creatively better. I think, much like I was saying with style, it's about focusing. So I know I don't have time, and I might not even have the latent skill either to paint in the way that I want to paint. I would really love to go and learn how to paint digitally. I would love to go and learn how to paint in the real world. And I don't have the time because I'm too busy doing what I'm doing. So what I have to have is manageable goals for my creative process. And the manageable goal is, I want to draw Bronze Age comics because that's what I loved when I was a kid. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And if I get some time when I'm retired, then I'll try and paint then. But I'd probably be more likely to be on a golf course or something. So, but yeah, it's. I think it's being focused and finding your niche where you can focus all your creative efforts. So that's a mindset, I suppose. As far as getting better creatively, I can't possibly hope to get better at everything, because nobody can. You can't fit everything in. I'd love to be able to do some things a lot better than I can do at the moment, but it's a time effort thing, isn't it?
Yep, that is definitely a mindset. I would call that a mindset. Yeah. So, what do you think about this, Mike?
Well, yeah, it goes back to the mindset thing totally. I think in terms of the mindset thing, you have to know what it is that you're working towards. And as far as art envy, it kind of connects to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where you have to ask yourself, am I feeling envious because I really want to draw the way that they draw? Or am I envious because the effect that this is having on me? I meant it's envy because of appreciation. Or is it envy because of success? You look at the volume they put out, or the contract they have, or the publisher they're working with, and you envy that, and somehow you've confused that with their art. There's all kinds of weird psychological crap that can happen to people, and sometimes you really got to step back and think about that. Something that I'm doing that I don't recommend at all because I'm insane is I've made a spreadsheet recently, and I've come up with my own kind of rubric to sort of grade my appreciation for different artists and to help me figure out exactly that. Do I like them for, their skills, or do I like them for some kind of emotional context, things like that? And I will tell you, I've been very surprised to find out that some artists that I thought I really liked I don't, and I'm not going to say at all who they are. I don't like anything about their art. I really don't. Like on a technical level, and this is, I don't mean this in an arrogant way. I mean this in an objective way. On a technical level, I can execute those various fundamentals better than they can.
Yeah.
So why am I so like enamored by their work? Well, I don't know. And I write that in a little bit of notes. I say, I don't know. Maybe it's the subject matter. Maybe it's the boldness that they're able to express their ideas. Maybe it was a really cool concept, but not a great execution. But I'm a person that loves concepts. I love the ideas of what things can be. Maybe it's that. So anyways, not to belabor it anymore, but my main point being, maybe look at why you're feeling that envy and try to figure that out first before allowing it to affect you too much. And if it turns out that you're envious because you really do want to do what they're doing, and there's something about it that, oh man, I wish I could do pencils like that or hatching like that or their anatomy or whatever. Something that I like to do is not trying to copy anything that artist is doing, but when I'm doing my next piece and I feel like whatever they do would be useful to me in the piece that I'm doing, I open up a little window and have like a nice little, one of my favorite works of theirs or something just open, just so I could look at it. And then that way, when I'm about to do something that I would normally do that I think they do better, I can look at how they did it and I can at least try to get something out of it. And that way, you're not just putting yourself down, you're actively working towards getting there. You're working towards erasing that envy and actually acquiring that skill that maybe they have that you don't have. But the caveat to that is it goes back to what you were saying, Teresa. Sometimes you just don't know. You look at something and you're like, wow, that's amazing. I don't know why, you know. And so that's where study comes in too. And it's all this balance thing. And it's about that intentionality, not only with the work that you're making, but about what it is that you're trying to do. If you're not really putting that extra effort towards building this career, you know, like if you're just doing this every once in a while when you feel like it, well, then you shouldn't beat yourself up when you're not doing the thing exactly like, you know, I go back to Jim Lee because he's like just an absolute workaholic. And a lot of people don't realize just how hard that guy works. It's insane how hard he works and has worked. And he's older now. And so he's not even working as hard as he used to. That adds up. You can't compare yourself to someone like that if you're not trying to walk in their footsteps and actually put in the time that they're putting into. That could be a very dangerous road to go down, to envy people like that if you're not also trying to keep up with that same kind of pace. Look at people that are, you know, kind of in your same shoes too, and compare and contrast if you need that confidence boost, you know. Look at your peers, look at people who've had the same amount of time and experience, the same you know, amount of time that they could put into it on a daily basis, and you'll find that it really is a matter of mileage, you know. Maybe your car doesn't go 100 miles an hour. Maybe it goes 80 miles an hour. That's fine. You'll still get there eventually, just not as quick as, you know, someone who's putting in that race car speed. I'm losing my analogies at this point. So point is, you know, go for a tune-up, get your oil changed, change the washing fluid. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I think, I followed your analogy and then I got lost when you started talking about cars. So
I don't know enough about cars. That's why I lost it.
I don't know anything about cars, so you lost me the minute you mentioned cars. What about you, Marsh? What do you think about mindset? What are the elements of mindset that you have found hacks for? Because we're basically talking about little hacks on how to get over these hiccups in our brains, right? So is there anything that you think you found particularly useful?
Well, I never have artist envy because I just always look at artists that are not as good as me. No. No, I've definitely had artist envy. And I can think of a specific example within when I was doing music and stuff. And really, I'm just going to reiterate what Mike said here. But, you know, I remember being very envious of where they were at with their music and why hadn't I gotten as far. I feel like maybe I'm a little bit better. You know, this is, you know, kind of younger, more arrogant Marshall, I guess. But I mean, I kind of felt like I was a little bit better than that person at what they do. And they were doing better than I was. And I was like, why is that? Like, what the heck? Like, how come people don't like my stuff as much, and blah, blah, blah. Well, the difference between me and them was I was just making my music and sharing it online. And that person was going out and doing shows and putting their album out and selling and doing all, like, they were doing a lot of work. And that's why. It was the work. The work is what separated me from them. And I mean, maybe they were even better than I was. You know, obviously my opinion was biased in that realm. But you know, it almost doesn't matter. I think as much as us as artists want to be as good as we can be, and we look at our art and we kind of hate it and think it sucks sometimes, you know, it really is subjective. It's very subjective for the audience. You know, I mean, somebody who doesn't do art can look at art and kind of tell which is better and not so great, and which is whatever. I mean, we all have watched a show like, you know, American Idol or something, and you can tell the ones who can't sing and who can. But when it comes to like somebody who can sing good and somebody who can sing extremely good, sometimes it's harder to tell the difference. And a lot of times that's, I think, what we're worrying about as artists. You know, if you've ever created art and somebody has been really into it, appreciated it, even given you a couple bucks for it, you're probably in a decent enough place where you can do something with it, you know? So just be confident in that and know that you're going to get better, you know, and the only way to get better is to just keep going down the road you're going. So just go ahead and do it, you know? A couple things, you know, as far as like mindset, one thing is, I think we all have blind spots, and the more self-aware we are, the better. And that's something that some people aren't self-aware at all. And that's an interesting thing to observe. And then some people, you know.
I love how you put that. Interesting thing to observe.
Well, again, the American Idol thing. Some people think like they're the best singers in the world, but yet everybody else knows they're tone deaf, you know, like that type of thing. You know, so being self-aware, you know, if you're not getting great feedback, well, maybe take a look and say, oh, maybe it's not so great. Maybe I need to, you know, fill up a few sketchbooks or something. You know, other than that, I think it would help a lot of us artists, especially if we want to do this professionally. It would help us to really get into some business mindset things. I think, you know, I just really think that we tend to think like a business marketing type of mindset is almost like the antagonist to the artistic mindset. And I don't think that has to be the case. When it comes down to it, you can see downfalls in both ways of thinking, but, you know, one's not evil and one's not good, you know? So I don't know, to me, I think that having a business goal is important. And I think that having a business goal can help dictate how far you're going to go with certain things with your art, you know? You know, I like what Russ was saying, you know, I would love to be like a painter, or I would love to try this or that, you know, maybe I could get better at watercolor, whatever it is that you are really interested in. You're like, man, I wish I could do that. But, you know, at the same time, you do want to make a career out of it. And I don't think it's settling for less. I mean, I think that's what we automatically might think is, or am I settling for less? But I mean, it's just about being realistic. What can I do right now? What can I, you know, accomplish? And then, you know, have some business goals. And if you need to tone down your style a little bit, you know, maybe a little less cross hatching or something, Jim Lee, or whoever, you know. You know,
Don't be talking about Jim.
yeah, no, I love Jim. He's a cool dude. But you know, just anybody who does, like, you know, you can tone down on certain things like cross hatching or whatever it is, rendering or whatever it is that you want to do. I mean, obviously we all have like our passion projects. It is my dream to have the time to be able to do the most amazing thing that I could possibly do, for sure. But I also really want to make a career out of this, and that's not going to happen if I don't put together some business goals and kind of go for it. And let's see, there's a couple other notes. I just want to see if I want to touch on any more of them. Another mindset that, and this will be the last point, is the idea of making money. You know, again, business type of stuff. We just have the stigma with making money, and you know, I think it's not only is it okay to make money with your art, I feel like it can be like an honorable thing, you know, to make money with something. You're doing something you love, you're putting something out into the world that is, you know, I mean, I don't think we realize the value that we bring as artists and storytellers sometimes. You know, we're putting out things that, you know, cause people to empathize more with something, or cause people to think a little bit differently about something, or cause people to just be entertained, you know, and I mean, you need that kind of entertainment in a world that sometimes doesn't feel so great. And you know, there's so many things that artists bring to the table. We do bring value, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with us making some money and even a lot of money, you know, and there's no reason why any of us artists need to be jealous of each other for doing that either. You know, to me, again, being thankful, being grateful, and cheering our fellow artists on that's just the way to go, you know. And I didn't know that all, you know, when I was growing up, but I've grown to know that. And I feel, you know, I'm really happy that I feel that way now, because that's how you can be part of a community. And I mean, all you guys sitting here, plus many more of our friends, you know, have been part of this community. And I mean, I think I'm better for it personally. And I wouldn't be able to function in that community if I was constantly looking at my fellow artists with envy and thinking, why are they getting somewhere and I'm not, or something like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
spot on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny that you should mention a couple of things you mentioned, because I was talking about this with Creed yesterday, and he was telling me, what did he say about it? I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said like he's changed his mind as time went by, and he's matured in the sense that he doesn't judge how much art he should be making, and that's really helped him make more art. So sometimes you think that a solution would be to make yourself feel guilty or make yourself feel more lacking so that you work harder, but that works for some people, I guess, but not for me and not for him. And we were talking about that, so it's great that we have so many points of view, because one size doesn't fit all, like with education. So any last points about mindset, anything you'd like to close up with?
I think picking up on what Marsh was saying there are few things in that humans do that are as ancient as storytelling. You know, storytelling goes back to cave dwellers. It goes back to hunting and doing all the natural things, and it's about imparting information. It's about imparting emotions via word of mouth or via pictures, and it is a vitally important thing for our culture, for all cultures. So that's something we should be proud of and proud of doing. And quite frankly, if somebody gives me £1 million because of the art that I'm doing, that's great. I have no problems accepting that money. I have no problems accepting a gig from Marvel. If you're out there listening, I will do it. Okay, it really doesn't matter. It's about storytelling. And from my perspective, when I was a kid, I've said this before, I wanted to be in the bullpen with Stan Lee and the other artists. And part of that was about getting paid to be doing what I'm doing. I was good enough for it to be of value to other people. And I think that's a big part of why I produce. It's not just the creativity. It's like being good enough that other people think, yeah, that's a worthwhile thing. And then being able to get that information, that story, that emotion out to other people. Yeah, absolutely there with Marsh on that. And from a giving back perspective and part of a community, I've definitely benefited from knowing all you guys and getting involved with that. It's a great community to be in, and no drama, which is really nice, because there's a lot of that out there.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't want to get involved in. So I'm interested in creating and getting on with books and enjoying other people's knowledge. But you know, if I were to get that kind of money, I would definitely reinvest that kind of money. I'd be looking at finding other writers and other creators to pay to produce books, because you've got to keep it going round. You've got to keep. If you're not financing it, then you're putting the kind of effort in that yourself and Marsh and the other guys are putting into a creative community, which means that inspires other people to go out and create. So yeah, that's it. Really, I just wanted to jump in there after Marshall because I really like what he said. So.
I think that's exactly why they don't give us much money, because we would spend it on making more comics. So
exactly.
This is why we shouldn't get more money. Okay, so Scott, any closing thoughts about mindset or about anything we've been talking about?
Oh man, I don't know. It's hard to add anything because everything that people have been saying is so on point. Yeah, I don't know what else to really add right now.
So, no is a valid answer. It's okay. Okay, yeah, I'll come back to you in case you come up with something.
Okay.
But Mike, what do you think? Any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to underline a little bit from the conversation?
I would present a slight counterpoint to a couple of the things that Marsh said, just as a devil's advocate.
Okay.
Not that I completely disagree, but I think it depends on the person listening. So for those who might be a lot younger or just starting, I'd say exercise caution when thinking about things like having a business plan and making money, etc., like that. Do it for the love of art. Figure out your voice and your place within the medium itself for a little while before kind of putting the cart before the horse. The only reason I say that is because getting into business with anything can be very emotionally and psychologically and physically draining. And if you start thinking about some of that stuff too soon, you will undoubtedly burn yourself out and maybe fall out of love with this thing that you love so much. I see a lot of kids putting out web comics and stuff like that, and it's great, it's awesome, but I see a lot of them also coming with the mindset that they need to make money, they need to get followers. For some reason, because they're not, that invalidates what they're doing, and it doesn't. You just have to keep doing it. You may not make money for a long time, it may take you decades, because sometimes it just boils down to some subjective thing of whether they like something or not. Maybe you are doing good work, just people haven't caught on yet, or there's something else that's catching their interest. Money is really tough to come by for a lot of people, and so for them to part with it is a kind of a big deal, and they tend to not part with it for luxury things, which that's what comics and all these things are. They're luxury items. They're not on the top of the list of needs, especially when so many other things are freely available too. So just keep that in mind, I would say. I go by, well, a couple times in my life, because I've kind of reinvented my art career a few times, but each time I've gone by a rule of thumb that if people are starting to ask me if they can buy stuff, that might be a good time to start thinking about business plans. But until then, just do your thing, explore, have fun, put it out there for people to see if that's what you want to do. But I wouldn't buy your first sketchbook and then also buy a ledger to start planning your business. I wouldn't do that. I'd buy another sketchbook, another one, and another one.
I mean, I would agree with Mike, but I would also counter that just a little bit, is that one of the things that for me that I realize is, to me, I don't think it's ever really too early to kind of think about some of this stuff, because like last year I started a mailing list, and this year I started a mailing list. This year I also started a Patreon. Now, Patreon may be a little different, but as far as like the mailing list, even if there's hardly anyone on it, I think I think it makes more sense to maybe start that in the beginning, because if I would have started that stuff years ago, it would be in a much better place. So I know people who've, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, because I know people who've started Patreon or whatever, and they haven't really had that big of an audience. And I think even like Marshall has kind of done the Patreon thing, and he was putting a lot into it, and it probably might not have been where it needed to be yet. So, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like some of this stuff, at least be thinking about it, because for me, I kind of regret not starting a lot of things sooner than I did. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just,
Yeah, I think it was going back to the one size doesn't fit all.
right.
Sure.
Right.
So some people need to wait and look inside themselves and stuff, and other people need to go out there and put stuff out.
Yeah. I was speaking mostly about people who are still just learning how to draw too.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily people on their career path yet, but you see a lot of people, at least on Facebook groups and different forums, where they just drew their first comic and they're like, all right, so I'm ready to finance the next one. It's like,
Right.
slow your roll, buddy.
It also kind of goes back to what was being said before about sticking to something. Like, it's, I said, I started the Patreon. I mean, I'm happy with where it is. I mean, I think I think I'm close to like $50 a month with like 8 patrons, which I think is really good. I mean, but you could get bogged down, and you could look at you could look back to, again, going back to what we were talking about, where other people, looking at some people that are like huge successes and like, why are they so successful doing what they're doing when I'm doing this? But you got to try not to think so much about that, because everyone's individual, everyone's journey is different. And for me, I'm happy with where it is. I mean, granted, it's not, I mean, I know people, I have friends that I used to work with that started this something I know nothing about, but this fantasy football podcast, and they're one of the biggest like patrons earners there are. They've got like 20,000 patrons, and I don't know what that equates to in dollars.
Wow.
But it's massive, and that's only one part of their income. And of course, they have employees, and it's a whole business. But every journey's different. So I can't look at something look at them and like, well, why are they like so successful doing this? And but I'm happy with where I am, and I know that it's going to grow, and I'm just happy that I finally launched it, because if I wouldn't have launched it, of course it's not going to grow. So you just kind of just realize that everyone's journey is different, but you got to start, you got to put in the time, and you got to stick with it, because I know it'll grow. Just like I know that I've been on YouTube for maybe 7 years. Marshall's been on longer than me. I mean, he just now starting to see traction. My thing is like steadily growing, and there hasn't been any. It's just over time, and it's just something you got to stick with. But then you can look at some people that just something happens where they had something that go viral, and they just get this gigantic boost. And it's like, well, geez, I mean, I think I make good content. Why isn't it happening to me? But that's not. It's kind of a dangerous mindset to think about, because all you can do is what you can do, and you just keep. But you have to do the work. If you're not doing anything, nothing's going to happen. If you are doing something, it may take a long time. Something may happen. It may not take as long time, but nothing's going to happen unless you're putting in the time.
Yep. Wise words.
Yep. And Marsh, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I really think, again, that just the fact that we're having points and counterpoints a little bit is, that's kind of a testament to what the importance of having the community is. I think it's funny because there's a lot of times I think I've disagreed with friends, but I kind of still agree with them. And even Mike was saying that, I kind of agree, but I also want to do like the devil's advocate thing. And I've definitely played devil's advocate a lot. Mike can attest to that. And, I just think that's a huge part of the growth. And we're here, I'm looking at the thumbnail for the video. It says, how do we continue to grow as artists? I mean, that's it. We being part of a community is a huge thing. And that's a big part of how we grow, whether it's through direct critique or just having that fellowship of people who do the same thing as you and you can relate to. And if you disagree, that's totally okay. That's again, we're talking about some of the business side of it. I believe that there's not really, as long as you're not like doing horrible things, there's no bad strategy really. You just got to pick the strategy that resonates with you and just go full force at it and give it some time. Give it, depending on what the project is or whatever, or how it looks, give it 6 months, give it a year. If it's not working after a year, maybe try approaching it a different way. But that's kind of more the business side of things. But there's just so many just ways we can grow. And one thing I know about humans is, as much as artists tend to be a little bit of hermits sometimes, we really need each other. It's just I benefit from having people be around me who are better than me, people who are around me who I can teach a little something. The give and take and just that camaraderie. It's really, it's priceless. So that's just a big part of why I'm growing. I mean, I was doing this creative stuff since I was a kid, and until I don't know, 8 or so years, maybe more, maybe 10 years, when I first started listening to podcasts and realizing, this whole MP3 player, and stuff like that before, we all had these, computer phones. I started listening to these podcasts and I started finding people who were actually very much interested in very much the same things I'm interested in. Art and Story podcast was a huge one for me. A lot of us talk about the Illustration Party Time one that Kevin Cross and Josh Kimball were doing. There was a lot of other people doing podcasts. I can name tons of them that I was really into. And that began kind of the realization that there is a community. There are people out there like me. And now it's flourished so much. Like, you can find somebody who's into exactly what you're into now if you want to. And it's also good. Like, we have our big thing tends to be mostly centered around 100 Days of Making Comics, but there's a lot of other people who may or may not have done that challenge that are kind of still involved in stuff. And, there's so many varied different kinds of creators, with all of us, and having that all those differences really helps too. I forget what book, but there was a book I read and they were talking about the size of classrooms, like, and they found out that, like, if there were only like 15 kids or something, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but if there was only like 15 kids in a class, or maybe it was more like 8 or something, like, it was kind of cool because the teacher, you would think that would be better because the teacher could kind of be on a one-on-one basis with a lot of these kids and they'd learn more. But they found out that the ones that had like a certain number, like somewhere around 23 or whatever, it was like a certain number there, like that was like the perfect storm, because you had enough time to be able to have some one-on-one with each kid, but at the same time, when you have too few people, everybody tends to start to agree with each other, and that's not helpful either. So yeah, I don't know. Community is a big part of growth.
Okay, I think I can jump on that boat, definitely. Like, especially like when we have this community that is not centered around any ideology, it's just centered around making comics consistently. And I think that's what makes this group of people so interesting, because it's like we're all so different, but we have one thing in common, is that we make comics every day, or we try to, at least. And okay, so I like that as a conclusion. So I think we're going to leave it here. Let's go around the room again to remind people where they can find you. Russ, would you like to?
Yeah, you can find me as Comic Book Black Belt on YouTube. I've got several websites: russleach.com, comicbookblackbelt.com, or my book onlydeathcansavus.com. And you can sign up to the email list there on any of those websites. And then the usual places: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Cool. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, you can find me at circworks.com. I have like we talk about, a lot of people probably watching, and I know everyone on the panel here are comic book creators, but I have some free tools on there. If you want to join my mailing list, you can get some free tools for creating comics. That's at circworks.com, and you can find me on YouTube at circworks, and I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and some of those other places.
Okay, Mike.
I'm Mike, and I make art and comics, and you can find me at Instagram for now until I get my stuff together.
That's what people do on Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay. Marsh.
It's donkeyjawprojects.com is my website, and you can find all my stuff there. And of course, my YouTube channel, Marsh Makes Comics, and Marsh Comics on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter.
Okay, and you're in my YouTube channel, so obviously this is me, and I'll put all the links in the description so you can go check all these wonderful debaters out. Right, thank you for hanging out, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully. Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.